Okay, I will get started. Famous Zoom question. Can everyone see my screen? Yes, audio test, thank you. All right, so I'm just gonna go through the changes to the HungerCount. If anyone, my notes here, if anyone attended the webinar for administrators a few weeks ago, you don't have to stay on for this. I'm literally only going to go, I'm just going to re-review the same changes that I mentioned at the end. But you're obviously welcome to stay. I'm going to be recording this webinar, and then tomorrow I'll be posting, reposting a portal announcement in the system with a link to the recording, and then also a reminder of where they can find user manual pages for the update. All updates will be made over this weekend on top of the admin changes that only apply to administrators. Go into client profile. So the first change you're going to notice is that for fields that you usually had an undisclosed option, you're going to see 3 additional options. So instead of undisclosed, they're being placed by didn't ask, prefer not to answer, and don't know. So we have gender, marital status. If you are not tracking the field, and it is not a HungerCount question, so for example, marital status, we are not going to add this field back in. This is only for fields that you are currently tracking. And then you will see, we will automatically be adding prefer not to answer, didn't ask, don't know, those 3 options. Going to street, there's a prefer not to answer option. Housing type, no more undisclosed, these 3 new ones. If you track referred by, you'll see those at the bottom of the list now. And then they're also going to be included in the ethnicity self-identified as section. So while we're here, you'll notice that we have additional options in the system. So ethnicity include more options. And then we have didn't ask, prefer not to answer, don't know. These answers, or this question, you can select as many that apply to the client. Disability used to be in the self-identified as section. It has been separated out from that. In Canada, 10 years or less, same thing. Used to be in self-identified as, and will no longer, it will be separated out of that. For any food bank, so in my test site here, I'm also tracking an additional option here. This field self-identifies as because I still want to track this if people are pregnant, then that's fine. But if that wasn't there, all that's left, as you can see, are other, none, and then these 3 options here. For administrators, if you are not tracking anything else in this field, now that disability in 10 years or less have been removed, network administrators can remove that field. So based on the admin changes, it doesn't apply to you now that we have these 2 separated out here. There's a question in the chat as to what types of conditions are included in disability. That is up to the client. So the question would be phrased as to, do you identify as someone who has a disability, or do you have a disability? So would it be, there's no set rule that is set upon the food bank or a certain level. Does the client identify as someone with a disability? And one, then you would select it from the options that you see. something real special about the didn't ask option. So when didn't ask is selected from any of the questions that have that available, when the profile is up for a forced review, the system will clear out that option and have you ask. So for whatever reason, you did not ask that question to the client, then next time it's up for a review, whether it's a merge, separated from household or anything like that, this or whatever the field is will be blank. And the system will force you to answer it. All current questions that are set to undisclosed in the system will be migrated over to didn't ask. So keep in mind, so if on Monday, if the client's profile is not up for a review, then whatever was set to, and then the next time it's up for a review, didn't ask will clear out, and the system will ask you to ask that client that question again. Any questions about what I've mentioned so far? Scroll down to the section here. Okay, well, the last thing I just wanted to also mention, let me go to the income. Not listed here. There are 3 additional income types that are going to be added into the system. Let me log into. So these current types are benefits. Sorry guys, I added this yesterday and maybe I added it to the wrong site. No. Here we are. All right, guys, I'm just going to tell you what they are. I put them in yesterday, and now I don't know where they have gone. There was a question, how do we know what questions we have to ask versus the ones we can remove if and we don't want to track? So Tammy, administrators will be able to see that. So that I would recommend looking at the administrative changes webinar that we held a couple of weeks ago. It shows that there are going to be fields, anything that's not HungerCount related, it will show what you can turn off and what you cannot turn off. So there are certain options that you can track, and then with the admin changes that are coming up, the system is going to show, do you want it to be required? Do you want it to not be required? Or do you want it to maybe not be used at all? 3 income types that are going to be added, and I truly apologize for not being able to show you in this list, but it will show in all of your lists when it goes live on the weekend, is Canada Recovery Benefit, Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit, and Canada Recovery Caregiving Benefit. So those 3 will be added to your list as options in the income section. So we will automatically be adding those for all Canadian food banks. Are there any questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, if we are allowing our clients to come twice a month, how is that going to impact them? Or is it just going to be their first visit of the month of March, or is it going to ask us to ask them both visits?
When it comes to like the data here, like asking these questions?
Like all of the HungerCount questions that are new.
You only have to ask them once. So once you fill out this information, it's been recorded, you can jump straight to the services page and just record the second visit the next time they come in.
Okay, perfect.
Any other questions? No, those are all the changes. The biggest change that you'll probably see is just the 3 options: don't know, prefer not to answer, didn't ask, and these being separated out. So we will be migrating these over for you. So if someone right now and self-identifies as says, yes, I have identified as someone with a disability, we'll check this off as yes for you. We'll move that over. 10 years or less, we'll change that over. If someone self-identifies as says none, then we will set these to no because they said none of them apply to them. Can we indicate didn't ask again as the answer, even if we've been prompted to ask again in a forced review? You can, it will just keep forcing you. It's pretty much like it's a task that's run every time the forced review comes. So it's just going to keep asking you. So it's going to keep clearing it out. So if I said if it didn't ask, the next time basically it's going to clear it out all over again. Is the reason for your visit being added to Link2Feed? It's already there. So if you're not currently tracking it in Link2Feed, that's an option that you can submit a ticket to our support team to add it for you, but that's already something that exists in Link2Feed. You can also decide if you want it to be a mandatory or an optional question. So it's already an option. You might not be tracking it. When it came out, we allowed food banks to opt in if they wanted us to add it for them. So it is something that exists. Is there best practice for asking about ethnicity, such as phrasing the question? That's a great question. Let's go down here for ethnicity. From what I've heard other food banks say, it's more about asking the client how they identify themselves. So what ethnicities do you identify yourselves with? And when I usually do intake, kind of just start with the list, like start kind of giving them examples with the list. And then usually they kind of fall into line with that. So, oh, I'm this. So like I start asking like, oh, this is what you're asking me. This is the answer that you're looking for. So I'm this and I'm this. And just to clarify, so if someone says, I'm First Nation. So for you to have Indigenous here, so it's like also just to clarify, like you identify as someone who's Indigenous. Just so that it just depends, like some might not, some might say, no, I don't, I'm specifically this. So whatever information that you get, you could track on that. There is going to be something coming later. There will be features that we will be building to put that type of phrasing, well, whatever the food bank decides on the phrasing in the system, so that all users, it's just like a standardized way for all users to ask the question in the same way. I don't know if anyone else has any feedback as to how to identify that to their clients. Some kind of show them the list instead of saying it, to say if they identify with any of them. Is there, oh, that are, yeah. So identifies as pregnant is clear, but other, like what? It's up to the food bank. Like, Other would be like, I don't self-identify as this, but I do as something else. So other options that food banks use maybe are veteran, breastfeeding, anything that they really want to track about the client specifically to get data from, whether it's for funding that they need or maybe board requirements. They add those options there, and then other would be just an all-encompassing, no, I don't identify with any of these, but I identify as this. Do you have to track ethnicity? Yes. So it is a field that's mandatory in the system, and depending if the client does not want to answer, or just depending on your process where, super busy this time, or, wasn't the client really, didn't really give off a vibe that they really wanted to go through all of these questions at this point, they didn't ask. If they're not sure, don't know, or if you're not sure, don't know. Linda, never done hunger count before. I'm new to the job. Are there general instructions on what to do? Yes. I think that might. I'm not sure what the process. I only hear from other food banks that they get some sort of like a package or something, or at least a link to what the current. So I'm not sure if you received that, Linda, or if you email me, I can probably provide resources as to like the history of the hunger count, so you can see previous reports and what's being done with that information. And then I can show you basically on what to do. I can give you tips as to give you a link to the hunger count report in the system, so showing you the answers to the questions. Under ethnicity, do you have to choose from all the options, or can you have an option of visible minority? You do. This is a locked list for ethnicity, so you do have to choose and select one of the options that are currently listed. If one wishes not to disclose their figure income, can you put 00? Yes. An actual number is not required, so you can buy as long as you select an option. So, for example, on this page, I have 00. The system's not going to stop me from moving on. For the Salvation Army, are the changes the same as what you shared? Some of your screens and options look different than ours. This is my test site, so that's why your options look different. The only things that are going to be changing in your system are the ones that I've specifically identified. So the fact of the 3 options: prefer, not to answer, didn't ask, don't know, in the questions that I've highlighted. And then the additional 3 income types will be added as well. One question, C4, you have low wages, not enough hours. So combined on Link2Feed, but on questionnaire, it's separated. So I think that's the visit reason. So you can go to administration, or an administrator can go to administration list, and you can update that. So since it's an existing section, like you can just add ongoing need, you can update the verbiage as well. Any other questions? Where will we see the consent checkbox? So if you are tracked, not every food bank is tracking consent in the system. So if you are tracking consent in the system, I'm not sure if I'm doing that in this site. It's some food banks track, verbal or written consent. I guess, what food bank are you from, Trudy? If it's in your system, then that's pretty much set at the food bank level. So is it something, if it's new, then basically, so it will be here. So consent will be tracked here. That's different than the HungerCount changes though. So the changes that you're going to be experiencing is just by coming over under like the Food Bank Canada standards, and that's different than this annual HungerCount changes. So you will see the consent signature here, and Trudy, if you send me an email, I'll send you a link to a quick YouTube video and a user manual page as to how consent works, but you will see it here, and that we'll do that. We already have a list of those food banks to update over the weekend, and we'll add that right here for you. Are we going to be able to put the amount of expenses? Yes. So right here, you can put dollar amounts for expenses if you'd like. Yep, no problem. There's a question about the HungerCount survey. So I'm guessing, Sheldon, you're referring to like the paper count or whatever is outside of Link2Feed. The PDF is only asking for Aboriginal and visible minority. Why do we have to choose from the list of ethnicities? I don't know if someone from Food Banks Canada wants to speak to that. I don't mind doing it, but I just want to give you guys a chance if you want to speak to that a bit more.
I answered privately, but I'll answer. Take into consideration that that we have food banks who do not use computers and have limited capacity to collect that data. So we are currently rolling out Link2Feed for all member food banks. And once that transition is complete, all food banks will be collecting this data based on ethnicities. So right now we're just kind of in a transition phase, and that's why there's a difference.
What, and then, oh. Thank you.
The question about the ethnicity question, I would not make it so important. If you feel that someone is not willing to answer or does not want to answer, then I would just say prefer not to answer and move on.
Right. I agree with, so Anita, I understand it's a tough question to ask, you don't like to assume, but the question is in no way asking you to. If someone identifies as Nigerian and not Black, you know, that's their, you're filling out this profile based on that client's identification. So it's almost like that's the same thing for disability or anything like that. So if they say, no, I don't identify as this, I identify as Nigerian, then that would be other. Oh, but again, as Sophia mentioned, if they don't want to answer, this is not a type of thing to really grow the clients on. If they don't want to provide that information, then that's completely fine. Even that information is useful, like to know that how many people are, you know, are open to providing that. That's still valid info.